Good morning and welcome back, everybody, to Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Adsit. And, boy, a little bit of a rough stretch right now for the Milwaukee Brewers. Really just continuing to play some very close ball games that we've really been accustomed to as fans. But a lot of these games right now seeming like they're kind of taking a turn for the worse at some point. Recently kind of been later in the games and just not having too many clean games, even with some of the wins that they've collected. Just really some difficult games, some very competitive games, yet just a lot of losing in the recent here to start the road trip. I know we talked about in the last episode, kind of thinking with the teams upcoming for the Milwaukee Brewers, hopefully that they could continue their positive trend against that, or after that homestand against the St. Louis Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Pirates, but really just kind of saw them fall off a little bit of that trend, only going 2-4. I know I had mentioned that I was really hoping that they could go 4-2 or even 5-1 in this stretch of games, but definitely did not see that here. Ended up losing both series, and we'll talk about the last game of that series against the Astros, and then talk about the entire series against the Miami Marlins, which the Houston Astros, from my standpoint, were completely understandable. You've got a team that started off the season really slowly. They, weren't dealing with a little bit of injuries to begin the year, still weren't kind of finding their groove, but they definitely have hit the ground running now as the season's gone on. They were playing the Brewers in a stretch of games that they were playing really well, starting that series, had a 5-game winning streak, and extended that to a 6-game winning streak with that first win, and then Brewers were only able to squeak out one game in that series. But then really, Brewers, I think, probably, playing, on paper, the easiest team that they've had so far this season in the Miami Marlins, and just not able to do too much, not really able to do much offensively either the first 2 days after some good pitching performances, and then that second game ended up collecting the victory that we'll talk about, and we'll dive a little bit more into some of the more specific things and player performances that kind of stood out to me, whether it be in more of a negative way or a positive way. But with that, we'll kind of dive into the first game. We'll finish off on talking about that final game against the Houston Astros there to end the first series of the road trip. So Sunday, we see Colin Rea get the ball and the call for the Milwaukee Brewers as the starting pitcher. And in all honesty, I thought this was probably the biggest struggled start for him so far this season. I think usually when we see Colin Rea out, he's usually a very heavy strike thrower, but in this game, just not really much of that. It seemed like he was getting into a lot of deep counts that we've seen, not able to work very deep into the game because of that, having that tough first inning that we've seen some of that trending for him as well. Home run ball got to him once again in this one in that first inning. So really, realistically, just a rough first inning, but the first inning and how rough it was just kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. It seemed like he was really struggling, finding the strike zone, a lot of large misses. Like I said, getting into those deep pitch counts and having that the pitching count really ramp up. So final line for him, he goes 4 1/3 innings pitched, allowing 5 runs on 8 hits, 4 walks, and 5 strikeouts. So really the big thing for Rea, obviously not a very big strikeout type pitcher, was able to record 5 in this one. But the 4 walks is kind of a red flag for him specifically, just giving up the free bases. And then the other thing that really stuck out to me in this one is in each of the 5 innings that he pitched, he was not able to retire the leadoff hitter of any of those innings. So, you talk about trying to start off an inning, recording that first out is such a huge thing for a pitcher. It kind of takes the stress off of them, takes that pressure off of them having to worry about holding a runner, or and there were several times that first inning started with a leadoff home run from Jose Altuve, and then later on, I think it was the third inning, started with a leadoff double. So definitely those extra base hits to lead off the innings too, not helpful or ideal by any means. But like I said, just a lot of deep pitch counts per at bat for him, and ultimately the reason that he was only to go 4 1/3 innings. And it just seemed like he would get ahead of some guys too. And then there was just a lot of big misses out of the zone, which we're not really accustomed to seeing from Colin Rea. He's usually pretty close to being around the zone, and if he's missing, he's not missing too far off the edges. But that just did not really seem to be true in this one. Bullpen didn't really help too much in this one. We saw Vieira come up. He gives up another run in this outing and ended up being designated for assignment. So I know I had talked about that a little bit when Tyler Black was sent down, just talking about some of the other options that we had. We did end up seeing Oliver Dunn sent down to AAA. So kind of the two big pieces that I was talking about, both Vieira and Oliver Dunn, now no longer on the team for now. Obviously, Oliver Dunn, probably going to see him at some point, depending on if he's able to kind of get back on the right trend of things and start up some of his success down in AAA. But Vieira obviously designated for assignment, so probably won't see him, assuming that somebody else picks up his contract, or if not, likely going to be off the team. And then another big question mark for me is Mitch White. Really a pickup that the Brewers made a couple weeks ago, adding to the roster. He's already been on a couple of different MLB rosters this year and has struggled on both of those teams as well. And we're seeing a lot of the same for Mitch White. I don't think that there has been an outing so far for him where he hasn't allowed a run. If there has, it's only been maybe one. So definitely a lot of a struggle for him. He struggles pretty mightily in this one. Brewers able to put up 3 runs in the top of the 7th inning and start to claw back a little bit. But Mitch White ended up giving those 3 runs right back. Kyle Tucker stayed hot. He got a couple of home runs in this game, including that 3-run bomb there in the 7th inning to pretty much put the game away, making it 9-4 at that point, which ended up being the final tally in this one. But kind of a side note, kind of going away from talking about some of the pitching and actually switching to one of the Astros guys. I don't think I've ever seen this. Kyle Tucker started off this game really struggling against Colin Rea. He actually had a couple strikeouts looking on backdoor cutters, and then ended up swinging, or had a strikeout swinging, for his third at bat against Colin Rea, also on a backdoor cutter. So really having trouble reading that pitch, and he ended up switching his cleats in the middle of the game, switched them to completely different cleats, and in the next 2 at bats hit back-to-back home runs in those at bats. So a little bit of superstition, I guess, for him. Pretty incredible to see somebody do that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody change a piece of equipment to that point. Maybe, especially cleats, I guess if there were to be like a bad lace or something like that, or, some of your cleats somehow on the bottom or your spikes on the bottom get somehow bent or out of shape or whatever it could be with that. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody just flip their cleats out of, I don't know if it was superstition or something, didn't feel comfortable. But to start the game 0-3 with 3 strikeouts and then to finish the day 2-5 with a couple home runs is pretty incredible. So definitely a new thing for me to see. Was kind of just interesting to see. Didn't even realize it until after the game because actually while that game was going on, I was driving my car home from down south. So I had about a 3-hour drive here to the central Wisconsin area. So definitely pretty interesting to see that. But I think going back to the game now, I think really the only positive thing that I saw in this game, and the biggest positive, we saw Bryce Terang. He recorded 3 hits in that leadoff spot in the order. He continues to swing a good bat. And another really interesting piece about Bryce Terang, Brewers will kind of use this to jump into this Marlins series, but as well as Bryce Terang's been hitting in a leadoff spot, hasn't gotten a ton of at-bats versus left-handed pitching, and really struggled against them last year, but he's seemed to hang in there pretty well, hitting, I think it's right around 250 right now for that against left-handed pitchers, so not really too bad of splits against that lefty-lefty matchup. But with the 3 lefties that the Marlins had starting in this whole series, which the Brewers' offense really hasn't seen a ton of lefties so far this season, obviously the writing on them has been that they typically struggle against lefties, but just really haven't even had too much of a look at any of the lefties this year, but end up getting 3 back-to-back against the Miami Marlins, and we don't see Bryce Terang make a single start in this entire series. So really interesting to see that decision from Pat Murphy. I haven't seen anything this year that's told me that Bryce Terang really just doesn't hang in there well against left-handed pitching. So definitely interesting to see, in this case, for him to not get any of those starts and really not get much playing time whatsoever in this series. But with that, we'll kind of just jump into, carry some of that information into some of these games against the Miami Marlins. So Brewers, like I said, ended up losing that final game against the Houston Astros. Ended up losing the series 2-3, or 2 games out of 3. And then, so Monday we jump into this Miami Marlins series, and the Brewers, geared up to see a steady diet of left-handed pitching. We saw Ryan Weathers on Monday and Joe Ross getting the call for the Milwaukee Brewers. And really unfortunate, another starter for the Milwaukee Brewers that ends up on the injured list. This time looks like a similar thing to what we just saw with Christian Yelich, some of that lower back tightness, lower back strain. So, definitely not what you want to see. Another starting pitcher, Joe Ross, only one of 3 right now that made the opening day roster as a starter that is still in the rotation. Now the only 2 remaining are Freddie Peralta and Colin Rea. So definitely don't like to see this. We've already got Brandon Woodruff and Wade Miley out for the entirety of the season. Jacob Junis, that's a little bit of a question mark on when we're going to see him return. DL Hall is returning here pretty soon. He just started his rehab assignment, but as of right now, only going to be returning as a bullpen piece, an additional bullpen piece for the Milwaukee Brewers. Going to be kind of thrown back in that role that he was with the Orioles last season, since he's had a little bit of a struggle thus far this season as a starting pitcher. And we've had some other guys fill in pretty nicely. I think for the most part, Bryce Wilson has done a nice job. I think Robert Gazer, which we'll talk about him, got the start on Tuesday's game. He's been really good so far. And even Tobias Myers, I think, has put together some pretty good outings as well. So definitely stinks to see Joe Ross exit this game after just 1 inning. We saw some good innings from Jared Koenig. We saw Yoel Payamps come in the middle of the game. And really, all told, to pitch 8 innings worth of bullpen, a really good bullpen day, which we'll dive into here towards the end a little bit of this game's recap. Offensively, we saw Andrew Monasterio. He swats his first home run of the season to straightaway center field. At this point, it was only his second hit of the season, so congrats to him, and good to see him get a home run over to center field, especially after the way Ryan Weathers was just dealing so far in this game. And Andrew Monasterio, finally, 3rd time through the order, able to have a little bit more luck off of him. And then how about the 6th inning? We see Christian Yelich pull off a little bit of a Houdini act on the base paths. He ends up drawing a walk in the 6th inning, steals second base, and advances to 3rd on a throwing error, and then has a legit steal of home plate with Willy Adames at the bat. So really awesome to see Christian Yelich. Obviously, that's a good sign that back is really doing well, considering he's running well. So really good to see that the back's doing good. But just a crazy play. He was dialing up the way that the Marlins catcher Fortes was honestly just kind of lobbing the ball back to Weathers, really not having too much authority on the throwback, really not with too much interest in getting the ball back quick. And Yelich was timing it up every time he would throw the ball back and took advantage of it. He kind of just lobbed the ball back. Yelich started his sprint and was able to score home on a legitimate steal of home base. So really awesome to see that. Really cool. I don't think I've ever seen that. I think I did see Randy Arozarena do it in I believe that was the ALDS a couple years ago with Tampa Bay Rays. That was pretty cool to watch live. But for a Milwaukee Brewer, definitely the first time I've ever seen a Brewer do that and have a legitimate steal of home plate. And that put the Brewers up 2-0 at this point. And then really unfortunate, we saw Elvis Peguero. He surrenders a run in the 7th inning, able to escape a little bit of a jam with a big double play. And then Trevor McGill comes in, 9th inning. Brewers up 2-1, feeling pretty good at this point. 2 outs, nobody on. So he's gotten the first 2 guys out, only 1 out to go. And actually had a 3-2 count on the Marlins batter Sanchez, who was able to get a base hit and then steal a base, and then ended up seeing a back-to-back base hit that ended up tying the game with those 2 outs. So really the Brewers only 1 strike away, and then we saw a key at-bat in the 10th inning from Adames end up resulting in a strikeout and a huge run-producing role, trying to drive in the go-ahead run in the 10th, was not able to do so. So he really continues to struggle. And that kind of brings up the topic. I don't fully understand why, because we've seen this with Frelick so far this year. For example, when he was in the leadoff spot, really struggling, and Pat Murphy decided, because of that struggle, we're going to move him down in the lineup, put him down, in that 6th or 7th position in the lineup. how come we don't see the same, from guys like Willy Adames? I mean, I know power-wise he's been one of the better home run hitters for the Milwaukee Brewers over the course of his tenure as a Brewer, but if a guy is coming up in a run-producing role, especially hitting cleanup, you expect him to be able to put the ball in play and not be having so many 0-4 games that we've been, seeing in the last several times. I mean, I still think he's putting together some decent at-bats. I think he's getting under the ball a little bit. Still seeing some pretty positive exit velocity and barrel rate from Willy Adames, but just not the results that we want to see at all. Just not able to get on top of the ball at all and hit more line drives, just really getting under the ball, and then also starting to see that strikeout rate kind of increase and the walk rate kind of decrease at the same time. So just his approach seems to have fallen off a little bit from what it was to begin the year when we were seeing him swing a really hot bat. So hopefully he's able to kind of break out of that funk. But then we did see Mitch White. He came in the 10th inning. Tough situation to come in a tie game when the other team only needs to get the runner home from second to walk off the game. Not able to get out of that jam, and the Marlins ended up winning this first game 3-2. So definitely frustrating loss. Probably one of the more frustrating losses so far this season for the Milwaukee Brewers. Just like I said, one out and realistically one strike away at one point, and not able to finish off the game and record the victory in this one. So then with that, we'll jump into Tuesday's game. We saw Robert Gazzer. He makes his first road start of his career and with the Milwaukee Brewers. And I really think, all told, he had a pretty solid start. We've seen a couple really good outings from him to begin his career at home, but I really think he had another pretty good start. In this one, I don't think the stat line is really true to how we saw him pitch. He ends up going 6 innings pitched, giving up 5 runs. 4 of those runs were earned on 10 hits, and interestingly enough, 0 strikeouts. But at the same time, he did not record any walks, which was really good. So, you kind of look at that stat and you realize, okay, well, that means with a lot of the hits, he's inducing a lot of contact, obviously, in all of his bats, but also doing a really nice job of living around the strike zone. And like I said, I think a lot of the base hits that the Marlins were collecting were weak ground balls or weak, little pop line drives that were just finding holes. And you do have to give credit to the Miami Marlins for putting the ball in play. That's kind of what you're taught from even being in Little League and whatnot coming up. Kind of the basis of baseball is the idea to put the ball in play, especially the two-strike approach, which we saw a pretty good job by the Marlins doing that in this one. But I think the 0 walks really kind of speaks true to Gazzer's ability to be able to live around the strike zone, not giving up too many or any free bases for that matter, and doing a nice job with that. And yeah, I just think some of that weak contact, he was really doing a nice job heading into the 5th inning with a really low pitch count. He was doing a really nice job kind of commanding and getting some early swings and early outs, and then ended up just really having a rough 6th inning, which, like I said, had a lot of that softly induced contact from the Miami Marlins hitters and just really didn't have too much luck with that. So really thought he had a pretty nice outing overall, and hope to see more of the same from him as he continues to be a key part, especially now with Joe Ross going out for this Milwaukee Brewers rotation. So going to be interesting to see. We did see some good things from the offense. Kind of jumping back, we saw William Contreras have a really nice day at the plate. He collects 3 RBIs, had an RBI double there in the 1st inning, along with a 2 RBI single in the 3rd, which had put the Brewers up. And then at one point after that struggle in the 6th inning, we actually had seen the Brewers drop to being losing at one point. They were down 5-4, and it took until the 8th inning. We saw Christian Yelich. He comes in a clutch spot with 2 outs with 2 on, and gets a huge 2 RBI triple to put the Brewers ahead, followed by an RBI double from Adames. So really nice job by Yelich and Adames to come in the key spots, come in the clutch, and put the Brewers ahead, and end up giving them the victory in this one. We saw some really good bullpen outings from Tobias Myers, who recorded the victory in this one. We saw Yoel Payamps have a really nice 8th inning, pitching in back-to-back games, and then a really nice bounce back for Trevor McGill, who had a scoreless 9th inning and collected another save on the season so far. So really nice job by the bullpen once Gazzer got taken out of this game. And even for Gazzer, even a really nice job, with the bullpen the day before, pitching 8 innings of bullpen work. It was really nice to see him come out and get 6 innings. It was really important that he was able to do that and kind of limit some of the bullpen arms that we saw on that day on Tuesday. So really nice job from him. We've seen that in each of his first 3 starts, being able to command well and kind of limit that pitch count. Really was looking in when he went into that 6th inning, was thinking that he was maybe going to be able to go into the 7th or 8th inning, but ended up getting roughed up there in that 6th inning, kind of got the pitch count up a little bit, and then Pat Murphy opted to take him out of this game with the score at where it was at. But nicely enough, with the Brewers bullpen filling in those roles, ended up recording 6 strikeouts for those 3 innings out of the bullpen after Gazer was not able to record any, and the Brewers ended up picking up a big victory in this one. And you just think, you wonder if that at bat from Yelich goes differently, the Brewers likely get swept in this series. So really huge to see him come through in that moment. Of course, the Cubs ended up winning on this Tuesday as well against the Atlanta Braves. So kind of just staying toe-to-toe with the Milwaukee Brewers that we've seen for the last 2 weeks. It feels like it's just been back and forth. When the Brewers win, Cubs win, and vice versa. So definitely interesting to see that. And then, so we'll jump into the last game. Not a ton really to talk about in yesterday's affair. Not really too much on either side. We saw the Brewers facing the 3rd straight lefty, like I had mentioned, Jesus Luzardo for the Marlins, who coming into this game had really mediocre numbers, having an ERA just over 5. But you got to look into his numbers a little bit deeper when you're looking at that. Going into that outing, he had a really high ERA before he went on the injured list earlier this season. But then since coming off of the injured list, he's done a really nice job, has the ERA hovering right about 1.5, so a really good job, and he's had some really good starts continuously for the Miami Marlins, and specifically has pitched really well at home. So you kind of knew, and with some of the Brewers' trends of struggling against left-handed pitchers, you kind of felt like this game might be a little bit of a shootout, and that's exactly what it was. We saw Freddie Peralta with a really nice bounce-back start actually from him. He ends up starting off the game, giving up a leadoff home run to Jazz Chisholm Jr. for the Marlins, but he settled in really nicely after that. There was, I think, only 1 inning after that. It was either the 4th or 5th, which was the only inning through the entire 7 innings that he pitched of the 1-run ball that he pitched in this one, where he had multiple guys on base in 1 inning. So really nice to see him limit those walks. Really nice to see him kind of ramping up the velocity. We saw as he got in deeper into the game, it actually seemed like the velocity was ticking up. Hit 98 on the radar gun a couple times, which we don't see a ton from Freddie Peralta. So overall, really nice job. Really good bounce back after a couple of rough outings from Freddie Peralta. So hopefully we're able to see more from that from him. Hopefully we're able to see more of that from him and see him get back to how he was pitching earlier this season. Definitely the ace of the Brewers pitching staff, and with all the injuries, we're really going to need him to step up, so we can pretty much count on him to come out whenever he starts and pick up a victory for the Milwaukee Brewers, which stinks to say that he recorded the loss in this one. Like I said, 7 innings of 1-run baseball. But you got to tip your hat to Jesus Luzardo. I mean, he pitched an extremely good game. Got to tip your hat. He did a really nice job locating, getting ahead of hitters. His slider and changeup honestly played really well off of the fastball. And he even kind of included, I was realizing, a little bit of a quick pitch from time to time to some of the batters to throw off their timing. And definitely just didn't seem like the Brewers could really get in a groove. Like I said, he was really working the edges of the strike zone, really doing a nice job of commanding and just playing the pitches off of each other. You know, he'd come through with a fastball on the inner part of the plate and then work changeup away or backdoor slider to right-handed hitters. So really a nice job for Luzardo. Definitely tough to see the Brewers not be able to score a run in this one, but got to tip your hat to a starter that comes out and is dealing and does a really nice job. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. Obviously wish the Brewers would have been able to muster a couple runs across the board, especially considering the Cubs ended up losing to the Atlanta Braves on Wednesday, so was a key opportunity for the Brewers to gain 1 game in the division, which I'm going to talk about just a little bit here, leading up some of the series that the Brewers have coming up. But that kind of wraps up the series against the Miami Marlins and some of the in-game things that we talk about. But I did want to touch on this. You know, the Brewers right now, I mentioned the starting rotation struggles that they've had. I mean, obviously, we've only got 2 guys right now that made the starting rotation to begin the season. that are remaining right now in Freddie Peralta and Colin Rea, like I mentioned earlier. I think Bryce Wilson's kind of solidified his role, done a pretty nice job for the most part, had a little bit of a struggle against the Astros, but for the most part, he's been a pretty solid starter for the Milwaukee Brewers, typically able to go at least into the 6th inning in most of his outings. Right now, Robert Gazer's doing a really nice job filling in. We're probably going to see Tobias Myers have to get thrown in there again. I'm guessing, unless the Brewers end up calling up, Aaron Ashby or whatever it may be from AAA to fill in. But definitely going to have to, I think what I was trying to get at is I think the Brewers are going to have to make a move here, well before the trade deadline. I think they're going to need to pick up a piece, make a trade, whatever it may be. I mean, right now the Brewers have pretty good depth in the outfield. They've got pretty good depth really in the entirety of the farm system in pretty much any position. So I feel like the Brewers have a big opportunity here to try and make a trade for a team maybe that's struggling a little bit. And a guy like Jesus Luzardo, for example, for the Miami Marlins, I think there's a good chance that he's going to be, in a trade deadline type situation, or in a trade situation for that matter, sometime here this season with the Miami Marlins off to a start this season where it doesn't really look like they're going to be there at the end of the year. Obviously still pretty early to say that, but the spot that their record's at right now, you kind of get the feeling that they're not likely going to be in a postseason run. So a team like that, you're thinking they're going to try and get rid of some pieces, maybe get some farm pieces to build their team back up and kind of start a rebuild. And I think the Brewers right now, their record is still in a competitive point. It's not like they're completely falling off the rails. We would definitely like to see the record a little bit better, especially in the stretch of teams that we've been playing. But you're going to have stretches like this where there's some tough games. You're going to have tough outings continuously from the starting pitching. So you can't get too discouraged by that. But I just think the Brewers are going to have to make a move, pick up some starting pitcher, some guy like Jesus Luzardo, who maybe started off the year slow, so doesn't have the greatest numbers, but in the recent times has really picked it up. I think Jack Flaherty or something from the Detroit Tigers, granted they're kind of in a competitive type race right now, so I don't know, not sure that something like that is an option, but I think the Brewers are definitely going to have to make a move to increase their starting rotation and make it stronger if we're going to have any chance here as the season progresses. So definitely just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, just wanted to talk about some of the matchups like I usually do that we have coming up. So Brewers are going to finish off their longest road trip of the season, going to be facing the Boston Red Sox. Looks like we're going to see Bryce Wilson later today. We're going to see Colin Rea here tomorrow on Saturday. And then looks like we're going to see, it's actually unannounced right now for Sunday's game. I'm guessing we're either going to see Robert Gazer in there again, or actually Robert Gazer wouldn't be for a couple more days. So probably even maybe Tobias Myers or somebody else maybe going to make an MLB debut or fill in a spot. So really not sure what the starting rotation looks like after Colin Rea for this upcoming flip through the starting rotation. So going to be interesting. And then that's going to be huge too. Following this series against the Boston Red Sox, we have a 4-game series at home against the division rival Chicago Cubs. And we're obviously right there with them going toe-to-toe. Cubs ended up losing in yesterday's game, so Brewers actually head into Friday with a 2-game lead of the division, which, granted, for playing the stretch of baseball that the Brewers are playing right now, it's a big sigh of relief to still have a 2-game lead in the division. We definitely could be seeing a completely different thing right now. We could see the Brewers down a few games in the division, so can't get too discouraged by that by any means. And going to be a big pivotal 4-game series. Probably going to see Shoto Imanaga for the Chicago Cubs, and their starting rotation is continuing to be really strong. So hopefully the Brewers are able to get a little bit more run support for their starting pitching than they were in that first series against the Chicago Cubs when they didn't score any runs against the starters in those 3 games. So hopefully we're able to see a little bit of that. And then look out, too. I was looking at some of the standings right now. Cardinals are creeping up. They've won 8 of their last 10, still sitting below 500, and their run differential does not look pleasing at all at minus 48 or 43. I can't remember exactly what it was. I was looking at it earlier. But their run differential is not pleasing at all, meaning that they've scored 40 less runs than they've allowed. So not good to see from them, but they're 3 games below 500. And like I've said, it seems like the Cardinals always make a big run like this, whether it be in the middle of the season, end of the season. And so they're only 5 games back right now, too. Pirates only 6 games back. And then the Reds have really just kind of fallen off the rails here in the recent times. Unfortunate to see that for them. But so Brewers have got to keep their eyes out for teams like that. They've definitely are going to need to start playing some better baseball. Otherwise, things could get ugly here as we approach the middle of the season, and hopefully the Brewers are able to stay competitive and hopefully make another postseason run and make it into the playoffs. But definitely a lot of time for that. Just wanted to kind of touch on that, as it seems like we're kind of entering almost a little bit of a panic time in the season where the Brewers better pick it up. Otherwise, we could see the lead in that division completely disappear. So going to be interesting to see if they're able to turn the tides here coming up in these next few series, and hopefully collect a couple series wins against a good Red Sox team and, of course, a good Cubs team as well. So with that kind of wraps up everything that I wanted to talk about here. As you guys know, BrewPod Between the Lines podcast is always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other mainstream podcast sites. So feel free to listen to this podcast from wherever it is you may like in the future. I can always be reached on social media using @brew_pod on Twitter, or by searching BrewPod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. Hope you guys are enjoying some of the content and some of what we've been putting out in these last episodes. If there's ever anything that you think I should touch on or focus a little bit more on, please reach out and feel free to leave any recommendations or feedback or any questions about the team, or like I said, myself, that you would like me to answer about my background or anything. So please feel free to leave any feedback or anything like that on any of those social media sites. Or however it is you are able to reach me. So with that, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this one. Hopefully you guys have a good end to the work week and are able to enjoy a nice weekend this weekend. Should be some decent weather here coming up, and should be able to get outside and have a good time. Maybe get some cookouts going here or something, and see what we've got coming this weekend. So with that, we'll see you guys next time. Talk to you soon. And of course, go Brewers.